First of all, I'm Sakiko Fukudapa. I'm the director of the program, the International Affairs program, at the New School, which we call ourselves SGPIA because we're the Julian Studley Programs in International Affairs. When we started in 2001, it was without the Studley. And so from then on, we've called ourselves GPIA. And when we benefited from the Studley generosity, we added the S. But that's how we call ourselves as our community. So welcome to this information session, admitted students meeting. And I'm not quite sure who is out there in the in the space participating offline, but I'd like to welcome you as well. This is an opportunity primarily for you to ask questions of us, and I am assuming that you have already familiarized yourself with the basics of the programs in terms of how we're organized, the kinds of concentrations we have, the programs in fact we have, the requirements and so forth, and any specific details you might follow up with a specific contact with Phil Acree, who's here, or myself, or any of the faculty. But I hope that today we're going to have an opportunity to just have a personal conversation about the program. And we thought that the best way to do this was not for myself or for Phil to, spout off, but for you to ask questions, and particularly of the alumni who experienced the program as students and have gone on to do many other things. But before we start, I just want to say that, I have been spending an awful lot of hours reading application files. So I have read your letters of personal statement that explain, where you are in your life, why it was that you decided that you were interested in global international issues, why you are interested in graduate school, why you think this is a turning point in your life when you want to take that extra step of getting a graduate degree, and how that you think that might change your career. And I think that the best way that we can understand the program is by looking at what the alumni are doing. We actually have, we don't have copies here, we can get them to you later on, but they're also on our website. We have made profiles called, oh, you have them, thank you, 10 Careers in International Affairs. And from this, you can sort of work backwards to see, how you go from where you are now to where you might want to be. And the point about looking at the alumni is that they are doing all kinds of things. This is not a program that gives you a straight pathway from here to one single destination. This is not a nursing school. This is not this is international affairs, which is a wide field, but which is also a field that essentially about grappling with complexity, with complex problems, and with each person trying to engage in the field because of the things that they're interested in and the values that they're committed to and the things that they want to achieve. And I think that, when I think about our community, and the reason why I, as faculty member, I've been here for 12 years as faculty member, and I only took up being a director this last fall. So this is I'm relatively recent in taking this leadership role, which is something that rotates around the faculty. But the reason why I so love this program and the community is because I feel really at home, intellectually at home. I feel, very supported by my colleagues on the faculty. I feel that the students and I share something that is much to do with the way that we would look at the world. And this is what we call the global perspective, that we have a global perspective. And I think that this is one of the big challenges in the world, that we have a 21st century that is increasingly integrated globally. I'm trained in development economics. My field is development studies. And so I look at the way that international economic transactions are driving this interdependence and integration, but the rules of integration are not always written in the way that is participative, that is equitable. And so those are the kinds of issues that we all study here, but in many, many different dimensions and many different ways. And you can see from these 10 profiles that you have people who end up working on issues of refugees, like Mohammed, who works for Danish Refugee Council, and Joey, who is here and working for IRS. Then we have people who work on issues of poverty and urban slums, like Sky Dobson, who works in South Africa for an NGO. We have people who work on women's empowerment, like Fatima, who is actually Minister of Sports in the government of Kuwait. And we have people who work on issues of responsible investment for businesses, like Tulsi does for an investment company in New York City. So there are many, many ways in which that people find a niche in amongst the multitude of career opportunities in international affairs. So I want to start by introducing our panelists, and I'd like to also ask each of you to just go around the table and introduce yourself so that we get to know each other. So why don't we start with a very short introduction of yourself. Maybe you can just say your name and where you're from. So shall we start here? You're a guest, okay.
I'm Nora. I am from Long Island, so yeah.
Okay, all right. You can say a bit more if you like.
Well, I'm finishing up my undergrad this semester, and yeah, I'm very excited to be here.
Good, thank you.
My name's Kaylee, and I'm from Washington State. I was a public defender for a long time, and thinking of transitioning into graduate studies for international development.
Well, international development is just as exhausting as being a public defender. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Lorraine. You guys might have heard from me. I'm the student ambassador of the MA program. I'm from the Philippines. I did my undergrad in economics and global studies on Long Island, and I'm in my second semester at GPA.
I'm Gabriel. I'm the ambassador for the MS program, International Affairs Science. I'm originally from Portland, Oregon, and I have an undergrad in environmental design and in political economy, and I've also done graduate studies in South Korea in Asian Pacific regional studies.
My name is
Yes.
Tatiana. I'm from Toronto. I'm finishing up my undergrad in European Studies right now, and I'm excited to be here.
I'm Julian from Miami, and I'm currently working for a government relations firm on a public safety campaign. But prior to that, I was in the Philippines for 2 years as a Peace Corps volunteer, working on literacy programs.
Hi, I'm Jose. I come from Spain. I've been working as a translator for the past years for the UN, and now I'm here.
Yeah.
Hi everyone, my name is Daniela. I'm from Fort Lauderdale, Florida. I moved to the city in July, and I'm very excited to be here.
Hi, I'm Melissa. I'm from Toronto. I my undergrad's in fashion design, which what brought me to New York 5 years ago, but I currently work in the tech space.
Hi, I'm Hannah. I'm from Seattle, and
this, I guess.
Good. And Phil?
Well, I'm a guest. I feel like one. I've met with or talked to a lot of you, including our alums. I'm the associate director of the program. I got here before Sakiko did. I got here in 2003, so I know a little bit more. Oh, but I also like to joke a lot. So. And my door is always open for you when you're a student and between now and hopefully when you become a student. So my email door is open, my office door is open, my phone works, so please keep in touch. And, glad to see all of you here today.
So now the alumni who are here, can you, in introducing yourself, say a little bit more about what you do?
So, hi, my name is Joey Yaki. When I went to GPIA, I did a dual concentration in development economics and conflict and security. I also participated in the IFP program in Uganda. I have worked at the NGO Working Group for Women, Peace and Security, and I now work at the International Rescue Committee. For the past 2 years, I've been on our East Africa regional team, so I deploy quite often to the field. And actually this Monday, I'm transferring into our global partnerships team, which is a kind of compliance and policy position. And I very much feel that my graduate education is the reason that I've been able to get these positions since graduating. And I would like to emphasize that Phil is totally true, that his door is always open, and he's a really great resource, and I could not be happier that Sakiko is now the head of our department. She will be a great leader for all of you, is my guess.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's Meg. I concentrated in government and rights within the International Affairs program. I worked for a few years at Human Rights Watch, working for within the program division within health and human rights and disability rights. And about a year ago, I transitioned over to an organization here in New York called Safe Horizon. It's the largest provider of victim services provider in the U.S. And I'm doing program evaluation there, which includes sort of assessing the implementation of anti-racist, trauma-informed, and human-centered models within our practice in serving people directly.
Natasha.
Hi, I'm Natasha Javed. I'm originally from Lahore, Pakistan. I came from Lahore in 2011, and a year later I was in the program. I think I'm going to start with echoing Joey's comments and how supportive the school has been, and the reason why I keep coming back and talking to more graduate students is because I really feel I owe it to the school and to Phil and to Sakiko and the faculty for really creating a very supportive environment. While I was in my graduate school and I was very new in New York, so I was really trying to navigate New York, and I wanted to work at the UN, precisely UNICEF. I got a lot of support from the school on how to begin with internships, consultancies, and how to find your way at the UN or UNICEF or wherever you guys really feel your interest lies. I had previously worked in Pakistan, so I had a lot of experience of working in a country where a lot of funds from the UN comes, and there was a lot going on back in the time because the MDGs were wrapping up. And when I came here, the SDGs were beginning, so there was a lot of discussions, and I was really interested in how it's going to play out and how the relationships between countries and how the program is going to be implemented. I then started doing a lot of internships and consultancies, mostly at the UN and UNICEF. And yes, now I'm the partnership officer. I began at child protection in UNICEF. Now I work for the Global Partnership to End Violence Against Children, which is housed at UNICEF, and it was an initiative which was launched after the SDGs. I'm the country engagement focal point, so I work with roughly 20 countries on their violence prevention programs. I'm sort of like the coordinator, and we kind of bring the civil society, foundations, countries, everyone coordinating, not from New York, but we have partners in country who do it. So yeah, I'm here to answer any questions, and yeah.
Thanks. Patrick.
Thank you very much. Hi, I was a student here in 2002 and 2003. I've recently come back to New York after working in the field for UNICEF, UN Children's Fund, in Africa and in South Asia. My last job in the field was in Pakistan. I was the chief of comms for the polio eradication team with UNICEF Pakistan. Pakistan and Afghanistan are the last two countries in the world where polio is still a endemic threat to under 5 children. A huge effort is going on there to wipe polio off the face of the map there. There are 300,000 vaccinators who reach 40 million kids every month in Pakistan, trying to get rid of this very tricky virus. I had worked as a foreign correspondent, working in Port-au-Prince, Haiti, for the Washington Post. And I decided during that time I wanted to move into international development, and I really wanted to work in Africa as well. And for the UN, a master's degree is an essential credential. You will not, from my understanding is, in my experience, is if you don't have that master's degree, you don't have a chance of getting a full-time staff position in the UN. It's essential credential. So I came to the New School while I was working for UNICEF USA, and lo and behold, 3 months after I finished my coursework, I was hired by UNICEF International and sent to Liberia, where I worked for 2 years in their post-conflict environment. And I'm delighted to see all the changes to the New School in the 14 years I've been away. Congratulations to Philip and to you and everyone else. And I agree, there was a special kind of energy among the student body even 14 years ago, which is a plus.
So let me just already, start by opening up to see if there are any questions that you have, and we could start the conversation there. Does anybody want to have a specific question? No? Yes.
I'm very interested in the international field programs, and you mentioned that you went to Uganda.
Yeah. So, do we still have the program in Uganda? I don't think.
Yes.
Yes.
No.
Okay.
Well, we don't right now, but I mean,
It moves.
the actual the countries shifts, over from year to year. But, yeah.
Well, I'd like to know a little bit more about your experience there and what your mission there was, or your
Yeah, sure.
concentration there.
So it's a bit different than what was depicted here. I love that they're doing this because this very much spoke to me given what I do for a living. But I went to Uganda with 12 students, and we all had different internships. So I actually worked at the World Bank, and for 3 months I worked kind of between 2 teams. One was the urbanization team, because at the time Uganda was doing major infrastructure projects on the roads, but as a product of that, a lot of people that were living in slums were being displaced. So the bank was also very interested in kind of mitigating the issues around having to move people out of their homes. And these are obviously very impoverished people. So the governance unit was also highly involved in this, and kind of undertaking consultations in the slums to try to work with the government on moving people out, because it was inevitable given the kind of road infrastructure that had to be done. So I worked under the head of their governance unit and the head of their urbanization department. And I did all kinds of different things, to be honest. Some of it was just, being a fly on the wall in very important, interesting meetings, because that's how the World Bank is. I did get to go to the field and listen to a lot of the issues that were going on in terms of displacing people. But I also just the field programs are a really awesome opportunity also just to kind of figure yourself out. So I had friends that were working for Slum Dwellers International, some people working for the UN, and so we were all kind of discussing what was going on in Kampala and the changes that we were seeing. Get to travel, and it was just a great opportunity to learn, I feel like I got a great grasp of the politics that were going on in the ground, even though I was only there for 3 months.
Did you do that?
Yes. Yeah, so I actually did the International Field Program in Colombia, and it was structured a little bit differently from, I think, the standard IFP, which my understanding is most was like people were going and getting different internships and consultancies within different organizations in the countries where the IFP was held. Colombia was a little bit different in that we basically had a project that we were working on as a team in advance of going to rural areas within Colombia that were in a post-conflict state. And essentially, this was a project that was sort of meant to be continued year after year. So the previous IFP students, started it and then handed it off from year to year. And we had partnerships with the local and state governments, and as well as a partnership with a university. So we had university students, local university students working with new school students. And it was, I would say, one of the most influential experiences of my graduate school experience. And it was just it was great because we had a semester to all meet as a team and sort of develop our ideas of a project that was mostly geared towards economic development, but sort of a democratic, inclusive process of coming up with economic empowerment and development. And then to sort of take that and then go out into the field and try to implement it was just the learning experience was incredible, because you kind of learn all of these practical skills within the context of the new school, but then going out into the field, you learn it's a very different ball game. And so it taught adaptability, flexibility, all of those things that I think were so crucial for me to understand going forward after I graduated.
So when you say that it was one of the most influential experiences in your graduate life, and you mentioned some of these sort of kind of personal experiences, but did it also have an influence in shaping the kinds of the fields that you wanted to pursue in your future career?
I think that it definitely sparked in me a desire to work directly with communities and the people that we aim to have an impact on. And I think that absent that experience, I may have taken a different path that was a little more removed. And I think that experience shaped me to sort of know that that's the kind of work that I love to do.
Joey, do you want to say some more about that?
Yeah, sure. I also think it was a really important experience for me, and I totally agree with. I had just never been in that kind of environment, so I came right from undergrad into graduate school. So I didn't have a lot of work experience, and I had never really been a part of these conversations. And for me, I think IFP really sealed that I wanted to work with the field. And since mine was kind of interesting, where I was seeing the development side versus kind of working directly with beneficiaries on some kind of governance issues, for me, I really decided this is where I wanted to sit. I wanted to be in the field rather than kind of working at a headquarter level. So
I think the interesting thing about the unique thing about the IFP program in our at the new school in GPIA is that it's a field sort of study program that is structured so that there is a faculty supervisor, but it also, within that structure, gives you choices and independence in what projects you pursue. You can also take up like an independent sort of research project. But I think the way that it is organized, where you work with a local organization. So Joey worked with the World Bank, so that's not quite a local organization, but it's the local office that's kind of embedded, and there are, large number of local personnel there. But in most other cases, like I think Meg, you worked with a local NGO, right, in Uganda, or was it?
That Uganda was.
No.
No.
Sorry. Yeah.
Colombia.
In
You were
Colombia,
Colombia,
we-
yeah. Oh,
yeah.
the university. Yeah.
And the mayor's
Right,
office.
Right.
Yeah.
So you're much more integrated into the local institutions. You're not sort of like this outsider who is kind of like a tourist watching what's going on. I mean, I think it's much more like a Peace Corps experience where you're much more embedded and it's integrated into the local institutions and the local interactions and the local debates. And I think that's what's very special about this program. And it's a long program. It's not like a couple of weeks. It's 5-6 weeks, depending on the student and the location. And the studio that you saw the video tape of explained is a sort of is a kind of a complement or a kind of extension, if you like, of the IFP, because we used to have when you were all students, we didn't have the studio. This is an innovation in the last couple of years. We have decided that students go on IFP, but they may not go on IFP. They may do other things, and they're interested in developing that into an independent research project, or it can be a project that is sort of like writing a thesis, but it could also be like making a video or something, and so putting all of these independent studies together in one sort of course called a studio, where students can talk to each other, where the faculty, like you heard Everita explain it there, is an innovation. So in this program, in the last 2 or 3 years, we have been trying to rethink some of the what we call the practice options, so that we are emphasizing this integration of practical skills, practical experiences, something called practice thinking with the concepts, the theory, the empirical evidence, the analytical skills that you're getting. So, in a way, it's not so much practice, but praxis. That a lot of programs might approach this thing about practice as saying, you go to class and here are the methods that you learn, and then you go and to work and you apply them. Well, it's not quite like that. You get you experience this practice, and that makes you think and critique and use those theories. I mean, you're trying to use the theories to understand what you're experiencing, and then you're using what you're experiencing to critique the theoretical frameworks that you're discussing in class. So that's this melding of practice and theory that we have in the program. And of course, another part of that is something called policy as well. Yeah. So now there was another question here. You had the same question about the IFP. Yeah, so there's always a lot of questions about the IFPs. We have, as I said, the IFP sites evolve over time. This year, I think they are Cuba, which is always very popular. Brazil, we have. Greece, it's based in Greece, but it's basically the Balkans, and deal with mostly to deal with migration. We also have Ethiopia and South Africa, right? And we're trying to develop one somewhere in Asia as well. Yeah.
I might add there are language requirements in some cases. Cuba, we want people to know Spanish. Brazilian Portuguese for Brazil, and so on. We provide that language learning for you, whether or not you're going on the IFP. You can take one language course here at the new school every semester that you're here, and we pay the tuition. It's not part of your graduate degree because it's language learning at a more or less fundamental level, but we do want you to take advantage of that, especially obviously if you're going abroad to a place where English isn't being used.
Yes, you have another question now.
I guess could any of you speak to kind of the opportunity of being located in New York and what doors that opens?
Or maybe I go turn here.
Yeah, well, briefly, a number of talented faculty they're here in New York, especially for the part-time adjunct faculty. From my experience, that was a real plus. And also having access to the NYU library, I mentioned that to fill up, that was also a great resource, besides the other. New York is a wonderful place to go to graduate school, especially Greenwich Village.
And do you want to talk a little bit more, Natasha, about what you were saying earlier about the networking among alumni and your kind of contact? I mean, you had mentioned earlier also how you got yourself into a position at UNICEF, and obviously being in New York City is very much part of that. I mean, it's all about networking, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. So I think what I did, honestly, I was just networking. I was really networking. I was doing internships. I was just applying for internships that I thought would really kind of add and would help me build a solid sort of resume. And for that, I had conversations with the faculty, with other students, but I would, even when we had guests in class, I would go afterwards and I would meet them. And by the way, that's how I landed my current job. It was through a class in New School where Susan Bissell, the Chief of Child Protection in UNICEF, came for a discussion, and I went and met her afterwards, and she said, why don't you come to meet me next week or something. It was really spontaneous like that. And I'm not so good at networking, to be honest, but I was really trying to be good at it because I came to New York and I realized there is this thing you have to really sell yourself constantly, and I really had no idea about all of this because I had just followed very traditional path of doing good work and then showing slowly. And then I realized when I came here there was a lot of this talk on networking and how to introduce yourself to people and how to meet them and how to tell them about your work. So honestly, I was learning all of that while I was in school, and I would go to networking events with alumni. I felt more comfortable talking to other students because I felt they were just in my boat and they were just there, and then now they're somewhere else, and I just want to know what happened. So I was doing all of that. I was doing internships, and I think I really wanted to make the maximum of my experience of being in New York because I realized there's so many. I had worked in Pakistan, so I was very comfortable about the field experience, but on the headquarter level, I was now trying to navigate myself, and so I did everything I could.
What about you, Joey?
So I did a year at UNDP as an intern, and I think that was hugely important. And I got that internship because someone who had gone to GPIA was now on the team that was looking for an intern. So actually, I think a number of GPIA students applied for it. But she was a really important mentor for me while I was in the internship, and kind of saying this is the part of your education you want to leverage, and this is how you get a job here, and here's my process, and here's the pros and cons of being a consultant. These kinds of choices that you'll have to make after you graduate, and it's really nice to have someone with your education give you some guidance. And I think being near the UN, if that's something you're interested, or I work at IRC, we're also headquartered here. You just have so many opportunities. You definitely have to look for them and apply for them and go to professors like Sakiko and say, who do you know? And she can call some of us. But it's totally worth doing it. And I also, so I was still in school when I was a fellow at the NGO Working Group on Women, Peace, and Security. That's a bit of a weird organization. It's housed at UN Women, but it's a third-party watchdog on the Security Council. And I also got that through, I actually joined NYU has a gender, I forget what they call themselves, kind of like a gender working group, but the new school can participate in it. And I started going to their meetings, which is really nice to have all these students interested in this. You know, we were all mostly women that were interested in working on women's rights issues, and I joined that group, and I would just go to their events, and I met someone who worked there, and they told me that they had the fellowship opened, and was I interested in applying. So you definitely have those opportunities. And then the one other thing I would suggest that I didn't do until the very end of my education, and I regret it that I didn't do it earlier, is the woman that runs career services really knows what she's doing, and she made me do this 90-minute pitch, which I was terrible at.
90 seconds.
90 seconds,
seconds.
sorry, 90-second pitch, not 90-minute pitch.
That's a long time.
And I am not a good public speaker, but that was so important, and it's free, you know, and she sits with you, and you learn how to do this. So you just have all these opportunities here to improve yourself. But that's been important in every interview. I literally go back to those notes even now as an adult, like, okay, what was I supposed to do? Because I'm not comfortable doing it.
Just a question, are the courses still largely taught in the evening?
Yes,
Yeah.
they're the same, yeah.
That was the case when I was
Yes,
here, which
so
allowed
from
me to
4 to
work.
6, yeah,
Which allowed
after
me to
4.
work full-time.
Exactly.
That
So
was,
the internships are very important, and you know I think that almost every student has some experience with internships, and usually you know there's a lot of, you know, both Joey and Natasha had internships at the UN, but UN is not the only place where people have internships.
That's
It's in many different places, including large NGOs like IRC, where Joey is now, but also small NGOs. But I think maybe the important thing that these internships help you to do also is to narrow down what you're interested, and sometimes discover what you're not interested in, and also narrow down whether you like to work in a large organization, or that's really not for you, or a small organization. And like Joey was saying about the IFP, that she also figured out that she was much more interested in working in direct contact in the field with people rather than in the headquarters office looking at books and documents and working on policy. So in a sense, I mean, I think a lot of people come to graduate school knowing exactly where they want to go. But I think for many people who come to graduate school, it's a matter of self-discovery and also figuring out that match between yourself and the opportunities that are out there, and figuring out that pathway from where you are now to where you will be happy doing what you really care about, and you know, in conditions that are comfortable and satisfying and stimulating for you, and doing a really good job. And I think the point about a career is not that you get a job, but that you get a job that you do well because you love it and you're passionate about it, and that you have the core competencies to do it. So Meg, you want to say something about your experience with this, making use of the opportunities for networking and other resources in New York City?
Yeah, I mean, just to your point, I think I came to this program sort of feeling like, you know, my interests are so broad. I want to, you know, sort of go through this program and identify really what speaks to me, and you know, going from this talk of sort of being a generalist versus being a specialist, and at the end of the program I was like, I think I'm still a generalist, and that's okay. And I think what I learned from that is, I think this program has resources and tools for whatever you end up, you know, if you know exactly what you want to do, there are ways you can hone in on it and really sharpen, you know, your expertise on one subject. But if that's not the case for you, there's also resources for, you know, developing skills that you can apply across different fields and sectors. But yeah, I think, and to speak to the network of new school professors and alumni and students, it is incredibly strong. I think what's so wonderful is it really is just such a high concentration of people who are very like-minded and who have similar drivers and motivations. And it's I think, especially in a political climate that can feel a little bit bleak, like being in a space where you feel like you're talking to people who have the same sort of motivations and worldview as you. I think it's a great place to learn and grow from everyone and sort of support each other. When I started working at Human Rights Watch, it was because a good friend and classmate of mine had been working there and wanted to participate in the International Field Program. And so she said, can you cover this position while I go? Like, they said that they would take her back, at Human Rights Watch. And I was like, I had just graduated, and I was like, sure. And then, that led to this, this network and this connection that, shaped my path.
Yeah, and I think that the field of international affairs is difficult to navigate because it is broad and because it is so kind of ill-defined. It is not, I have a son who is a lawyer, and the pathways are very narrow and very well defined, and shifting is sort of difficult. The field of international affairs is much broader, and that's why I think this kind of flexibility, the self-driven motivation for finding exactly what it is that your niche would be is so important. And that's, I think, one of the reasons why I personally feel that developing alumni networks is so important. I'm so very grateful that the four of you have agreed to give up this beautiful sunny spring Sunday and even a newborn baby. Maybe actually this is a bit of a relief.
I swear. I walked out, it was so nice.
to come and meet you and to so it's something that we are also trying to develop further, developing kind of opportunities and venues for alumni and students to get to know one another. Yeah, Phil.
Absolutely correct. We have an event coming up on the 11th, this coming week, on migration, and there'll be some of our alums there, including one who is the head of migration affairs in the New York City Office of the Mayor. We also have emphasized the field program a great deal. You saw how it fits into our curriculum in that introductory video, and it does infuse our curriculum, but it's not a requirement. You might get the wrong idea. You might not want to go away for, actually it could be as many as 9 or 11 or 12 weeks during the summer. You may want to stay here and do something in the United Nations Summer Study, which I'm passing out here. In addition to a lecture, it includes a practicum. So the placements are not always certain, but we will try to place you in an agency within the UN or an agency that works with the UN here in New York. So that's still one more aspect of the practice of our program. And yet, to make it clear, these practices are not the whole of our program. It's a program based in theory and history, and as Sakiko said, that infuses our practice and it becomes a form of praxis. So it's an interesting curriculum, but we don't want you to think that it's one internship after another. On the other hand,
Headed by Peter still?
Sorry?
Is that headed by Peter still?
Yes.
Yeah, Peter Hoffman I actually followed him here. He taught at my university and then moved here and convinced me to go to the new school. But I just cannot speak more highly of a professor. And he really knows the UN system, but he's also very much an academic. So if you do want to stay in New York, he's just an unbelievable advocate here.
He does the placements into the practicums, he does the lecture for the UN summer study. He leads you on field trips to various embassies and things. He brings in outside speakers. So it's a wonderful 7 or 8 week period during the summer.
Yeah, this is actually another way in which our program is somewhat distinctive and unique in that many of the UN study programs tend to be like a superficial sort of a visit to what it does and how it's organized and so forth. This is much more of a deep dive and a more of a critical perspective. You take this course not necessarily because you love the organization. You may be critical of it and you may come out more in favor. You may go in favor and then come out more critical of it. But I mean, it's what's good about it, I think, is that it brings in the theoretical studies of the UN as an international institution within this global order, and how the international order is structured in terms of powerful states, and what do the powerful states do when they get together in the UN, and how do the less powerful states have a voice in an organization like that. So there are all these sort of theoretical aspects of it, but also the program has symposia. So there is a lecture on a topic, let's say conflict and gender or something like that, and then there would be in the same week, a symposium on the same topic, in which there are speakers from an NGO, from the UN, from academia, who come and discuss this issue. So something like conflict and gender is, well, Patrick knows all about it from the ground up, let's say in Liberia. So, you would have a lecture on that issue, about the different interconnections, for example, between conflict and poverty. And then you would have somebody who has been working with, let's say, UN Women, or the UN Office for Political Affairs, coming and talking, but also somebody from maybe IRC who would come and engage with that issue. So you have this, once again, this melding of this, international affairs as a live thing that is going on, that is practice, and the theoretical issues all in one place. What about some of the issues of some specific skills or specific topics that anybody has any questions about? One of the things that I want to say is that the new school is a very interesting kind of it's like a city that's made up of little villages. And so we have our program in international affairs, but you can take courses in many other programs. So many students take courses in the New School for Social Research, which is organized according to disciplines. Philosophy, history, politics, anthropology, sociology, economics. Or you can take courses at Parsons School of Design, because many students are interested in, for example, cities, are interested in how urban spaces are designed. And the Parsons School of Design has a particular strength in design thinking, which is, you studied design, I guess. So someone like Gabriel, who is interested in sort of like environment and cities and the spatial aspects of things, would find some interesting courses at Parsons. So there are just many opportunities for you to, and also in Milano there are courses on nonprofit management, on fundraising, things of that kind. So there is, and our courses, our requirements are structured in such a way that there is actually quite a lot of space for electives. I mean, there's some degree programs that are really, really so tightly, knit so that, there's hardly any choice. But I think if you're careful and you don't, the problem is that a lot of students come and say, oh, look, this is so interesting, Hollywood and the world, propaganda, wow, and then there's this course on the fashion industry and human rights, and here's another course on conflict, and so you sort of kind of have this smorgasbord, and you end up taking bits of courses here, there, everywhere, and it ends up being sort of something that doesn't quite add up. So you have to be quite strategic, in thinking through what your course choices would be. But there is, I just want to emphasize that the opportunities for the kinds of courses you take actually are quite broad. Did you have a question?
I remember the opening plenary, they mentioned something about a degree course.
Yeah, the graduate minors, yes.
Is that more or less related to what you were mentioning right now? Because I'm really interested in media and culture in it.
Yes, yeah. Oh, yeah, that's great that you mentioned the media. So the graduate minors are specially constructed programs that you can take and that will, I guess, go on your degree. But but there are not that many of them. So there is a graduate minor, for example, in migration. There's a graduate minor in urban futures. There's a graduate minor in economic policy or something, public policy or something like that, and various other things. But there are not many of them. There's also like a certificate in gender studies that you can take. But I'm going a bit beyond all of that. I mean, those specially constructed minors have certain requirements. You have to take certain required course, and then you have to take three electives that are listed as approved electives. But even if you don't do that, like if you're interested in media and international affairs, that's a perfect sort of a combination, because not only do we have the media and culture concentration in GPIA that has all kinds of interesting courses on the way that you can understand international affairs and politics through the media, or how media affects these interactions. You also have within our program some practical skill courses like documentary filmmaking, but you can also do even more if you take courses in the media school of media. We have a school of media in the school as well, in the new school. I think once again, if you sort of know where you want to be oriented, you can from the very beginning, start looking to see how you can structure your studies so that you will graduate with the technical ability to make documentary films, for example, and the intellectual richness of the topics in international affairs that you would want to produce in. Yes?
Do the concentrations go on your actual degree, or are those just...
I thought they did, Phil, and my Phil says that it doesn't, so I don't really...
They do land on your transcript.
Okay.
And you can certainly feature it on your CV, definitely on your transcript.
Okay.
I might add that at 4 o'clock there is a reception, and hopefully all of you will be able to go to the reception. Hopefully all of our alums will be able to stay unless they have to run home. And then we can do some more informal discussion. There aren't that many of you, and we can talk quickly and answer more questions. I think you have a session starting at 2:45.
That's right, yeah, we have 10 more minutes, yeah. Do you have a question?
I just
Yes.
wanted to confirm that all mentioned that the minor would, correct?
The minor is brand new. I believe it goes on the transcript as well. Whether it goes on your diploma is another question I'd have to find out for you.
Yeah. Yes.
When do you have to officially pick your concentration?
This is after 1 year. Maybe Phil
Right,
can give the
in the
exact.
second semester, many of you were asked when you applied what concentration you were thinking of, but that you're not bound by that. And then as you get to know the faculty and go into your second semester, then we ask you to finally declare it for sure.
Yeah, so the program is structured in such a way so that in your first year you take some of the required courses so that you don't really need to select your concentration right at the beginning. I mean, you can fulfill the requirements for a concentration by choosing it at the end of your second year. But it's helpful to do that as well. And there's a little bit of, I keep on saying to students, I have to exercise tough love sometimes, and sort of say, well, by the end of your first 2 semesters, you better decide what you're interested in. I mean, it's really part of this process that I think of as the graduate school process, where you begin to be much, much clear about exactly what you're interested in and why you're interested in and where you want to end up. And so, if we were all open about when you declare your concentration, it could be sort of leading you into this problem at the end of graduating with being as lost as you were at the beginning of the program as to what you're really
it goes so
interested in.
very fast. I think everybody at this table will
exactly.
agree. It's a very quick process. People
Yeah.
come in one semester and it seems like they're gone in a
Yeah.
couple of months.
Yeah.
It really is a fast process.
Yeah. I wonder if there are any other questions. Otherwise, I want to ask, what, if anybody, if you could all say, something about some of the specific things that you found most valuable in terms of whether it was sort of like skills, particular kinds of. The reason I asked this thing about the skills is because I think that the career paths in international affairs, as I mentioned, as I kept on repeating, it's not like nursing or law where you have to know a certain number of things and pass certain exams. But at the same time, there are certain core skills that you need, but they're not very well defined. And so I think it's useful also for you to start thinking about them as well, even as you're applying to graduate school. And so maybe in hindsight, maybe you have some ideas. Meg, you want to start here? You look like you're really nodding.
Well, I'm just reflecting back on, so I would say as far as concrete, really like tangible skills, I'm not sure if it's still a requirement, but like the research methods piece. I remember being a little bit daunted by the description of what research methods was, and sort of went in with a bad attitude. But then I loved it, and I felt like, I think research, it can seem like this nebulous thing, but there are actually, many methods and models that really work. And so, getting the chance to sort of go in there, and I was like, I don't know how to pick a topic. I don't know how to ask a question, a research question. I had Professor Christopher London, and he really encouraged me to sort of say, well, what interests you? What ask any question, and then sort of taking that and breaking it down into sort of a more rigorous methodology. And I was like, okay, it's not actually that difficult when you break it down into these sort of tried and true research methods. So I would say that definitely was something that then, I took that and then I chose to do a thesis versus the practicum. And I used everything that I learned in that course in real life, in practice, in the field. And so it was just like, for me, that connection of like learning in class and then going out and using it to write my thesis. So I think that, and also I think that's sort of the practical skills piece. And the other thing that really resonated with me throughout the program was a critical approach to any sort of theory. And that's something that I think is really emphasized at the new school at large. And it's something that I think has sort of become a part of, anytime I'm looking into any sort of new, ideology or theory, it's a critical approach that they really teach you how to think in that way here.
Yeah, I mean, I think we talk a lot about critical approach, and I think this really is sort of our core educational objective. And it's not just to be a contrarian. It's that I think that even in a professional context, actually, I should say that I've been a professor here, and for 15 years or something, but I do also have a couple of decades working in international development for the World Bank and UNDP, and I think about how I made my way, and I think that I felt my strength as a professional in a large organization was being critical, not attacking. I don't mean, criticizing, but having this kind of a critical inquiry approach, so that when I did a project evaluation, I could question, it is being asserted that digging wells will help, these farmers. Is this really true? And it's that kind of skepticism in whatever situation you find yourself in that I think is important. We have actually a question from Robin on live stream. Hello, Robin. And the question is quite a straightforward one. How long is the program? It depends on whether you are applying for the MS or the MA. The MS is a program for people who have had 3 years of professional experience, or in case of Peace Corps, it's actually 2 years. And that is 30 credits. So the length that it takes depends in some sense on how many courses you might want to take. I mean, if you really accelerate it, you could do the MS in 12 months by taking 4 courses a semester, and then also taking a couple of courses in the summer. The 42 credit MA, which is the standard program that I think most of you have applied to, is 42 credits. So most people do it within like 2 years, including the summer. There's quite a lot of flexibility as to how many courses you take at a given time and how long it takes. Yes.
To go with that,
Yeah.
how would you say your experiences close with like your work, study, life balance?
Me?
Oh, just the students.
Yeah.
I did work actually the whole time that I was at GPIA, and I did different things. I worked as a bartender and a waitress when I first moved to New York, just because it made my life easier here. And it was nice. I mean, I purposely picked something that was flexible that I could do my classes with. But I do think because we offer evening courses, it is pretty, I mean, you have to be a diligent individual to work and go to school. But it's totally doable. And I feel like even an internship at the UN, you can work 60 hours a week as an intern. So that is
I know. I mean,
that is a full-time job, even if you're not being paid for it. So
I must say I am totally amazed, because I really do find that, like Joey, so many students work, 34, 40 hours a week, take on internships and do really well in class. And it's not necessarily the people who have these sort of hyper schedules that do badly. It's actually those are the ones who seem to do really well. So I'm not quite sure how it works.
And I think I was
Yeah.
able to manage my time also. I was doing an internship for the most part throughout my course of the time when I was at New School. I got a job before I even graduated. So, and then I think I was constantly taking evening classes throughout the program. I never had a daytime
Yeah.
class. I don't know how, but it's doable.
Yeah, I worked full-time. I had a job with the U.S. Fund for UNICEF when I came to the new school, and I kept it while being a student. And then when I finished most of my coursework, I had to shut down my social life. And, I stopped reading the New York Times every day, because the reading for graduate school is much heavier than undergraduate. I don't think anyone reads everything, Professor.
Now you tell me.
But that's the way. It's also this is an investment. It's
Yeah.
not a cheap program either.
Yeah.
So.
But you can also
have to
be
take advantage of it,
strategic
yeah.
about what you choose in each semester.
Financially.
Yeah.
So if you have a really heavy reading course and you know that going in, then maybe you want to take an econ class, or you want to take an M&E class, or something that, like, I very purposefully did that. So I would take like 2 heavy reading courses and then 2 classes that were not like that, where it was just problems. It's just a different way of thinking, and it's easier.
Yeah.
The only time I felt it was a bit tough was in the summer, because in the summer the courses are like tight, and they're like, you have to, it's a very quick course, and there's classes more
Right,
often, and there's a
right.
lot of reading, so you're basically doing a lot of
Yeah.
reading every single day. And that was the only time where I felt like there was something
Yeah.
or the other assignment every week almost, and that was the
Yeah.
only time where I felt I could have maybe taken a little
Yeah.
step back from my work stuff, but yeah, I think that was the only time where I felt it, not during the other 2 semesters.
Yeah, the courses all meet once a week for 2 hours. So I think that makes a big difference. Did you have a question? Yes. And this is, sorry, by the way, we are sort of right against time. So this is the last question.
So I'm
Yes.
just curious, for the students entering, how many of them were already at the start of their kind of career, or already, within the field that they wanted to work in? So you mentioned that you were working for UNICEF, and then you, I guess, supplemented your career already with the academic or training that this provides. So I guess, is there some sort
It
of...
is, I think it varies. I don't know whether we have data on this, but there are some students who are just, out of undergraduate, and then some who have had experience. But it's usually, I don't know, half and half, something?
Well, I would say as many as 70% of the incoming students are here because they want to chart a new path,
Yeah.
or a slightly different path, or they're Wall Street refugees, and they want to complete
Yeah. So, I think we can continue this conversation over refreshments at 5 o'clock, right? It's 4 o'clock.